Hello YouTube. Researchers have accumulated a lot of information about how ordinary looking clouds begin to behave completely in a strange way. And science cannot explain this yet. Today I'll present research of my Belarus colleague Vadim Deruzhinsky, a very capable researcher and author. And also I'll present my own research. In science, a classification of clouds has been adopted, I would say about 200 years ago or more. Back in 1803, Luke Howard suggested dividing clouds into groups depending on their appearance, which he correlated with their height. Howard identified three main categories of clouds: cirrus, layered, and cumulus. Each of them has several subgroups like cirrus cumulus, cumulonimbus, etc. As is commonly believed, the position, density, and state of particles in clouds determined the weather. On one hand, clouds filter part of the sun's rays, on the other, precipitation is formed from them. Clouds are seemingly simple and understandable phenomenon, but in fact, they sometimes behave completely inexplicably. Here's an interesting case that happened to the Russian by the name of Sergei Alexeyenko. Flying in 1975 over the western part of the White Sea, it is called the Kandalaksha Bay, and if you watch my videos, you, I'm sure, have heard about the strange maze phenomenon on land. Anyway, he was amazed to see how the clouds moved from north to south, lined up, as they said then, in a square nest way. That is, there is a small cumulus cloud in each corner of the square, and clearly observing the distance between them. That's how the clouds functioned. Approaching the northern shore of the lip, the clouds were rearranged into a cloud ribbon, as if they took each other by the hand, and this ribbon moved over the water surface of the lip, recalls Alexeyenko. After passing the southern shore, this cloud ribbon suddenly broke, and the same cumulus clouds formed from it, lining up at the corners of the square, like those that approached the lip from the north. And then this cloud layer continued to move south. Making sketches of this phenomenon, he was saying, Alexeyenko was saying to himself, so much for the water vapor, but whose commands does it follow? Alexeyenko cites another similar case of intelligent behavior of clouds. In 1980, our helicopter made an emergency landing late in the evening on one of the mountain ledges of the Pamirs, that's Pamir Mountains. The cornice is a platform of 100 meters by 300 meters. On one side, there is a chasm more than 1.5 kilometers deep. On three sides, there are mountains. So, abyss on one side and mountains on three other sides. During the landing in the helicopter, some smelly varnish was spilled inside, so we decided to sleep on the ground, covered with tarpaulin. When it got dark, I clearly saw how a long luminous cloud floated out of the gorge to our ledge and curled into a ball about 300 meters away from us. I turned on my side to face the cloud, and when I was already falling asleep, suddenly it seemed to me that a hand was reaching out from it to us. I pulled out a flashlight and illuminated the ground. Indeed, a whitish, gut-like hand stretched out from it to us. Well, here the gut is almost there, and I flashed it with the light. Slowly, as if reluctantly, the cloud gut hand began to move into the cloud. To hell with it, I said to myself, I have to sleep. And covering myself with tarpaulin, I dozed off. In the Pamir Mountains, at the altitude of 3 kilometers, it freezes at night in early spring. I started to feel that I was freezing, but suddenly, for some reason, it became warm and I fell asleep. With the first lightning flashes, we woke up and realized that the cloud occupied the entire cornice. Even the helicopter 10 meters away from us could barely be seen. When the first rays of the sun shone, the cloud shrank to its evening size, then jumped several times and began to rise smoothly upwards. The pilot waved to it and shouted, "Thank you, my friend, for keeping us warm at night." The cloud suddenly turned into a long boat, glowing in the sun, and quickly sailed over the mountain pass. An hour later we arrived in the city of Nurek. Parting, I asked the pilot, "Do you really believe that the cloud warmed us at night?" He replied, "We have everything alive in the Pamirs. People, mountains, clouds, everyone or everything helps each other. And then a person is 96% water and the cloud is 99%. The connection between us is direct." An interesting case related to the behavior of the clouds, Alexeyenko once heard from his friend Nikolai Vasiliskov, who served as a radar operator of the Borisogledsk air hub in the Voronezh region in the early 1980s. One morning, Vasiliskov saw several small cumulus clouds appear in the cloudless sky, which behaved very strangely. At an altitude of about 3,000 meters, they formed an almost closed ring with a diameter of 5 to 6 kilometers and stood motionless in such a position, as if watching the Earth. An hour later, flights began at the airfield. One by one, the jet engines roared into the sky in the very middle of the cloud ring. The most surprising thing was that the exhaust jet from the planes did not impact it. It was still hanging over the aircraft separation point at the end of the runway. When the last fighter jet took off, the circle was rearranged into a cloud ribbon which quickly disappeared over the horizon. A day later, in approximately the same place, at the same altitude, and at the same time, the mysterious performance in the sky was repeated again. Now, my audience, here is something from my research. I have written about it and mentioned in my videos and lectures and books. This is from the files of the top secret Soviet UFO military and academic UFO program called Setka. This has to do with the 1974 Borisogledsk area in Russia. That's where they were teaching Top Gun pilots. And this is where they were beset by UFOs. So, Plaksin, who was the Setka liaison between the military and scientists, described the area as one of the most important anomalous zones of the former USSR. That year, a very interesting case took place at the Povorino airfield. A motionless black cloud appeared over the site. It was hovering at the altitude of 7 kilometers. It was approximately 1.5 kilometers long, size-wise. The radar below indicated that it was an aircraft. A jet was sent to intercept it. There were 2 pilots aboard. As soon as they entered the cloud, a sharp siren pierced their helmets' earpieces. The sound was powerful, reaching above pain threshold. At the same time, their onboard device illuminated the dangerous altitude reading, and the aircraft began shaking violently. The pilots were barely able to shut down the power and with great difficulties guide the aircraft out of the cloud. The cloud hovered over the airfield for about 4 hours and then it disappeared. The Setka researchers were never able to determine what that cloud was or consisted of. Think about it. And here's another case from my files. I have often mentioned it. In the summer of 1990, a ship was harbored in the Ust-Belaya village, a large rural community at the shore of the Anadyr River in Chukotka. its crew noticed cumulus clouds that suddenly formed a perfect circle. In the center of the circle, one could observe clear blue sky. The watch officer, Alexander Polorotov, took pictures of the event unfolding before their eyes. Groups of aircraft exited the circle and flew away, to disappear in the surrounding clouds. The Soviet sailor, who previously served in the Air Force, knew the types of the aircraft of his country. The aircraft he observed in the Chukotka sky appeared 9 times. Polorotov was able to take just several pictures before his camera malfunctioned. When the film was developed, a cigar-shaped object could be seen on some of the photos. It had a strange luminescence, radiance, and some black dots were visible at a distance. But the mysterious aircraft, also observed by 7 other crew members, they were not on any of the photos. The Soviet crew members experienced the same side effects as the native hunter in that area in the 1989 UFO encounter case: general weakness and headaches. Please look at my videos about this Russian territory of Chukotka, located very close to the United States. It's in the playlist. You will find it in the link in the description to this video. I think you will like it. And here's what Mikhail Lazarev from Volgograd reported. I saw the first strange cloud phenomenon on September 17, 1998, in the middle of the day. Several small low-beam clouds at the altitude of about 2,000 meters formed at an almost closed ring with a diameter of 1.52 kilometers. They were in this position for about 2 hours, as if watching the Earth. A day later, at about the same place, at the same height, altitude, and at the same time I saw the cirrus cumulus clouds taking the form of wedges arranged radially with the wedge-shaped side to the center of the circle they formed. Nikolai Marchenko, who worked at the Baikonur Cosmodrome spaceport, he also reports on very curious clouds. What I observed contradicts common sense. This happened in the early 1990s, when preparations for the launch of the next Soyuz spacecraft were underway at the spaceport. On the evening before the start, we went to the steppe, meaning the savanna-like area. We are lying on the tarpaulin, drinking tea from a thermos. Mechanically, I looked at the rocket. Against the background of the sunset sky, it looked like a fantastic huge minaret. But then I noticed a bunch of white clouds near the horizon. They looked like sheep huddled around a trough of water. But where did these sheep come from in a cloudless sky? However, the thought of this flashed in my head and went away. On the morning of the launch of the Soyuz, I again automatically looked at the western sector of the sky where I observed clouds yesterday, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The sky is still cloudless, but the sheep remained. I did not think about the clouds for long. I got caught up in the commotion. 4 hours later, I still remembered about the sheep. They were grazing in the same place in the western sector. Moreover, if earlier unusual clouds were held together, now they have stretched out in a rare chain. There were 7 of them, all of the same ellipsoid shape. How could such a restructuring happen if there was not the slightest breeze? And then a completely wild thought came to me. Are the clouds really waiting for the launch of the Soyuz spacecraft? And what do you think? And so it turned out the lamps were really on duty at the horizon until the rocket rumbled into space. I didn't notice at what exact moment the clouds disappeared, but soon after the launch, the western sector of the sky was clear. In addition to the strange duty of clouds, it remains a mystery to me how they could even appear in the dry air over Baikonur, in which there not even a trace of water vapor in the summer. No trace of water vapor in the summer. Think about it. The anomaly is not only the appearance of the same clouds in the same place and their strange movements. Such clouds also produce incredible actions. The famous anomaly researcher Charles Fort, analyzing the files of scientific journals at the beginning of the 20th century, collected a lot of messages, so to say, that have remained until now without any explanation. For example, the precipitation of black or bloody rains, and in one limited space with an interval of several days or months from the same clouds. A correspondent, or actually a reporter of Knowledge magazine, reports on a black rain that fell in the Clyde Valley on March 1st, 1884, and another black rain that fell 2 days later. According to this reporter, black rain fell in the Clyde Valley on March 20, 1828, and then again on March 22nd, 1828. Why is this strange sequence? According to that magazine, Nature, a black rain fell on September 4, 1873 in Marlford, England, and more than 24 hours later, a second black rain fell again in the same town. A very strange story with the black rains of Slains, Scotland. Listen to this. According to the Reverend James Rust, from the Scottish Showers village, I guess, black rain fell at Slains on January 14, 1862. The second rain at Carluke, 140 miles from Slains, on May 1st, 1862. Again at Slains on May 20, 1862. And finally again there on October 18, 1863. Scientists have offered an explanation that the first and second rains corresponded in time to the usual outbreaks of Vesuvius volcano activity. However, Mr. Rust objected that the third and the fourth rains do not correspond to any known manifestations of volcanic activity on our Earth. And later it becomes more hilarious, so to say, according to the publication of La Science pour Tout, between October 1863 and January 1866, black rains fell 4 times in Slains, Scotland. Scientists have given an explanation. One of the 8 black rains, 5 coincided with the eruptions of Vesuvius, and 3 with the eruptions of Etna. Well, Charles Fort took it with irony. Emissions from one distant volcano, having passed over most of Europe, could not have fallen somewhere else, but unloaded exactly over one small northern parish, as well as 3 other ejections from another distant volcano, showing exactly the same preference, if not marksmanship, for the same small parish in Scotland. Equally absurd was the explanation that the source of the black rains was exploding meteorites and their debris. Accuracy and repeatability are equally difficult to explain. Charles Fort himself offered this hypothesis. I personally imagine an island near the ocean trade route. It could well have received garbage or waste from passing ships 8 times in 4 years. Well, in Dzerzhinsky's opinion, the concept of the fort about falling garbage from a parallel world also ignores the main thing: the binding of events to a specific area, as well as the appearance of the same strange clouds of unusual shape there. In Slains, Scotland, black rains fell around a small space in the center of which was the church parish. And here's a similar story. In the yearbook of facts, Professor Campini reports to Professor Matteucci that on December 28, 1860, at about 7 p.m., in the northwestern part of the city of Siena, Italy, it rained heavily for 2 hours, and the rain was bloody color. The second bloody downpour passed at 11 o'clock. 3 days later, it rained blood again. The next day, there was another bloody rain. Skeptics will say rain is like rain. It is unprecedented, even bloody, but sometimes there are such things here and there. However, there is one oddity. All these rains were exactly in the same quarter of the city, so to say. This is a small space of a couple hundred meters, and not a drop of rain fell around it, neither ordinary nor bloody rain. And over the rest of the city and its surroundings in general, the sky was clear, without any clouds. This and numerous similar facts which Charles Fort cited refute, as it seems to Dzerzhinsky, his main hypothesis that all these strange falls from the sky are a substance that enters our atmosphere from space. They say that earlier science refused to recognize the possibility of stones falling from the sky, and now it will have to admit that in addition to stones, everything else falls from the space, including blood, incomprehensible substances, pieces of meat, as well as it rains from living beings, or rains living beings, frogs, snakes, fish, etc. And you hear cases like this all the time. But it doesn't fall from space at all, but from strange looking clouds that appear from nowhere in a clear sky, hang at the height or altitude of several hundred meters, and then disappear without a trace, so that they can appear again in this place in a day or two and continue their work. These clouds, in fact, bombard the area with all sorts of substances. As a rule, an area of couple of hundred by a couple of hundred meters. Their distinctive feature is that they hang in one place. The wind does not carry them away, although other normal clouds carry them around. At the same time, there is a direct connection with UFOs. Often such strange dark cloud appears in the sky and then turns into a flying saucer or another man-made machine, and the cloud disappears. In March of 1832, a yellow substance fell from the sky onto the fields near the Russian city of Volokholamsk. The substance resembled silk, burned in the fire with a blue flame, and soaked in water, dissolved, and the mixture resembled resin. This resin did not burn on the fire, but boiled and swelled with bubbles. The resin resembled amber in color, rubber in texture, and smelled like oil mixed with wax. The area of the fall was 600 or 700 square meters. The height of the layer was about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. On August 6, 1835, in Marsala, on the west coast of Sicily, a small but completely black cloud appeared out of nowhere in a completely clear and quiet sky. It inexplicably increased in size in different directions, and from it a hail of stones rained down on the city, which destroyed the roofs of houses. On April 4, 1846, lumps of gray tarry matter, the size of a nut, fell out in the Belarusian Vilna, now the capital of Lithuania, Vilnius. When burning, the substance gave off a nasty sweet smell. Immersed in water, the substance completely dissolved, turning into jelly. On July 20, 1855, near San Francisco in the United States, companies of soldiers who were on exercises, they were caught by a rain of blood and pieces of meat resembling beef. The pieces of meat ranged in size from a pigeon egg to an orange. On June 17, 1857, a farmer in Ottawa, Illinois, in the U.S., witnessed burning pieces resembling coal or slag falling from the sky. They fell in huge numbers, and the strangest thing is that when they fell, they formed, as if it were, letter V 50 feet in front of the eyewitness. Steam was coming out from the ground from the fallen burning pieces. The big pieces were completely burned. The small ones were half burned. Mr. Bradley, an eyewitness, reported that at first a very small but extremely dense and very dark cloud appeared over the garden, from which everything fell. The weather was magnificent. There were no thunderstorms or lightning discharges. On August 1st, 1869, raw meat and blood fell from a clear sky for 3 minutes and covered 2 acres of Mr. J. Hudson's farm near Los Nietos, California. The day was clear and windless. The meat fell in chunks, ranging in size from 1 to 6 inches. That's 2.5 to 15 centimeters. Short, soft hair also fell abundantly nearby. There was an article in the San Francisco Evening Bulletin on August 9, 1869, which tells about this case. Also reports that 2 months earlier, similar meat and blood had rained in Santa Clara County. On March 3, 1876, in Olympian Springs, Bath County, Kentucky, USA, flakes of a substance similar to beef fell from an absolutely clear cloudless sky. According to the stories, nothing was visible in the sky except this falling substance. It fell out in the form of flakes of different sizes. Some were about 2 inches across, others were 1, 3, or 4. That's from 2 to 10 centimeters. It was like a heavy snowfall. The flakes lay in a layer on the ground, on trees, fences, but the whole phenomenon was narrowly localized on a strip of about 100 yards long and about 50 yards wide. The study of pieces of flesh by scientists showed that there are pieces of lung tissue and masses of cartilage and muscle fibers. Why and how all this fell from the sky in the form of small crumbs, no one could answer. On October 16, 1883, a dense cloud appeared from nowhere over the town of Montesson, Gironde region in France. A white wool-like substance began to fall out of it in fist-sized chunks. Eyewitnesses, of whom there were many among the locals, believed that the cloud inside just contained this material. The samples were sent to the publisher of the scientific journal La Nature, but he was unable to identify the substance except that this something that was charred by being set on fire. In October 1886, in a small, clearly marked place in Chesterfield County, South Carolina, USA, for 10 to 12 sunny, cloudless days, completely inexplicable rain poured down. The strangest was not only and not so much that the sky was completely cloudless and clear, but for 10 or 12 days the rain hung over or hovered over one small area, and it was possible to enter or exit it. This is absolutely inexplicable from the point of view of meteorology. The Earth's atmosphere is moving, so the rain itself is always moving. In this case, it stood motionless in place for about a week and a half. In addition, the Earth rotates, the air temperature changes. This was not due to the causes of rain. At the beginning of the 20th century, Charles Fort wrote out thousands of reports from scientific periodicals about such strange rainfall just in the 19th century. Anything fell everywhere, pieces of meat and other unidentifiable flesh, incomprehensible substances of various kinds, from jelly and butter to foul-smelling secretions of an incomprehensible nature, and other incredible stuff. But what is more interesting is not even this strange thing that falls from incomprehensible clouds, but these clouds themselves, which from the point of view of meteorology are simply impossible. Here are 10 their main signs or traits. Such a cloud appears in a clear cloudless sky out of nothing, literally before our eyes. It grows in 30 to 60 seconds, but so far nothing falls out of it. Question: if there was a substance there, which then the cloud begins to unload, then why did this substance not immediately begin to fall, but then began to fall as if on a command when the cloud formed? Such a cloud has, as a rule, a dark color, which is inexplicable because the dark color is only in thunderclouds, which are covered by other clouds from the rays of the sun. In fact, the color of storm clouds is also white because there is white vapor, but these clouds are dark in a cloudless sky, which from the point of view of science is simply absurd, since water vapor cannot have such a color. Such a cloud hangs at the altitude of 300 to 500 meters motionless above the reference point set below and is not blown away by the wind. Then, in many cases, this is repeated after a few days. Again, the same cloud appears exactly in the same place and performs the same actions to unload. Some command occurs and the cloud begins to unload, throwing off or out the substance. The unloading lasts for several minutes, then this cloud disappears as quickly as it appeared. If we build hypothesis from a rational point of view, then Dzerzhinsky would call this the seeding of life. Some ancient civilization has laid down a program for us, according to which, from time to time, certain portals are formed above the very surface of the earth, through which various elements of wildlife and living beings fall out. My Belarus colleague would like to draw your attention to the fact that in most cases, when frogs, snakes, fish, snails, and other things fell from such strange clouds, scientists identified these creatures as unknown species. Perhaps this is how we have new species, and not according to Darwin at all. And he supposes all sorts of strange creatures from the field of cryptozoology also appear on our planet in this fashion. But this is only one part of the question. There are at least two more aspects. Firstly, UFOs are also formed from such strange dark clouds. Portals? That's absolutely so, and we gave you examples. Secondly, UFOs hide inside clouds, or somehow make clouds manageable for monitoring us, like that black cloud over the top secret Soviet training facility. There are no answers, and even Dzerzhinsky, a fan of science fiction with a rich imagination, doesn't know what all this is. Although the scientific texture, the most reliable, is collected in this topic much more voluminous than all UFO sightings and all other anomalous or paranormal phenomena in general are combined. Therefore, it is surprising that researchers of the unknown or paranormal phenomena do not really study this topic, and the only important research remains so far the books of Charles Fort. That is, since the 1920s and 1930s, in fact, no one has been engaged in the topic and is not really engaged now. There is not even such a trend in modern paranormal research. Well, Dzerzhinsky advises readers and listeners to look at the sky more often and follow the clouds. Perhaps some of the clouds behave strangely and give out that they are controlled by someone through remote access. And he notified that for us this will soon become real with the development of nanotechnology. What I want to add is this. First of all, in my books I have the story of the great Russian scientist Tsiolkovsky and the strange visions he had of the clouds, and I talked about it also on my TV interviews and so forth, on some programs that people like to see. I want to tell you, well, Tsiolkovsky was himself a very mysterious person in many ways, and he was one of the fathers of the modern space exploration and rocketry. You can read it in my books, but here's what I want to add also. Those who read my books or maybe heard my lectures at conferences, I presented cases of encounters of and observations of strange silvery clouds in the orbit by cosmonauts and others, orbit and elsewhere. No one really talks about them as a separate phenomena, but I do. So, if you like my research, please support me through the links you will find again in the description to this video. And please subscribe to my channel. Please tell others. I do want to bring more stories from Russia, Ukraine, Central Asia, Eurasia, China, and some other parts of the world which I had the opportunity to visit, to do some field research, and of course from the areas I have not visited but still research. I thank you for your attention to my work.